Welcome to the Lap Podcast. This is episode 16, the season finale, 9-time world champs.
In this episode, we're breaking down McLaren's first Constructors title since the turn of the century, Lewis Hamilton's Mercedes farewell, giving our top 5 moments of the season, and more. What a weekend to wrap up the 2024 Formula One season, and doing so in beautiful fashion was Lando Norris and the whole McLaren team. This is the Lap Podcast. My name is Kevin Walker, and I am alongside, as always, my good buddy and F1 know-it-all, Tristan Rines. A McLaren Constructors, a farewell for Lewis and Mercedes, and a bit of momentum for what could be a massive season next year for Ferrari. So, Tristan, what were your takeaways from this incredible weekend in Abu Dhabi?
Feels very official. Feels very, very official there from you. My takeaways? I mean, what a momentum swing to start that race for your boys, for the Papaya team, right? Like a near disastrous start with Piastri opening up the window wide for Ferrari to kind of, possibly take that Constructors away from you guys. Max Verstappen doing his part, of course. However, the wrong Ferrari was at the front. Carlos Sainz, all due respect, but seeing what Charles did this past weekend, I mean, insane. Lando Norris, to his credit, from lap 1 all the way to the finish, clutched the Constructors from McLaren. The team's first title, by the way, since 1998, his 4th win of the season. And by the way, Lando Norris is the first driver in the last few years to win the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Max Verstappen had that for the past 4 seasons. So, I mean, and Oscar also, by the way, doing his job. I mean, very impressive performance from McLaren, even starting the race effectively in last place after that lap 1 incident with Max Verstappen. I mean, Piastri still doing his part to come in P10 to pick up that extra point just in case they needed it. I mean, that shows a lot of character. The pit crew, the strategy were superb. They were on their game, like I predicted they were going to be. Yep. 2 sub-3 second pit stops. Super, super, super clutch.
Can't ask for more than that.
I mean, all in all, McLaren, they finally got over their botches from earlier in the year, and they held on to the Constructors title. I mean, hats off. They earned it, dude.
9 times have they won the Constructors since the beginning of the McLaren name. Now breaking the tie with Mercedes, who had 8, and entering another tie with Williams for the second all-time in Constructor wins, far, far ways behind a Ferrari that has 16 of them. Mm-hmm. 16 of them things. They got a lot of them. So we are now second in F1 history with 9 of them. But did you know a little fun fact?
Oh, a Kevin fun fact.
This is the 3rd straight year that all Formula One teams have scored at least 1 point.
Okay.
Sauber getting that, not even Sauber, Zhou Guan Yu getting 4 points right before the end of the year. Mm-hmm. Kept the streak going.
Yeah.
So, just a little
nice little Kevin fun fact.
And then it's also the 12th time in F1 when the driver championship wasn't, the driver who won the driver championship was not part of the Constructors title.
Mm-hmm. The last time it happened in 2021, hurts to say it, but it is what it is. This was one of the best. I mean, this is definitely one of the best seasons since I've started as a fan. Right. Certainly. We've watched Red Bull, just demolish the field for the last 2 seasons.
Let's say what it is. We saw Max dominate the field for the last couple of years. Checo kind of riding his tail and then falling off towards the end, especially this year.
Checo was still good in 2022, and last year he had a couple of wins early. I mean, I'll give him some credit. We've spent plenty of time lambasting Checo Perez, and it doesn't mean that we're going to stop in this episode.
It was actually in our Spotify Wrapped. It was like minutes bombarding Checo. It was an absurd number.
Oh, I mean, you do your part, but Checo was still good. Until this year, the wheels didn't really fall off, and then they really fell off pretty heavily. But we're going to talk about Checo plenty, don't get me wrong. But, and also within the context of this weekend, I mean, one more time, all due respect to Charles Leclerc, did everything in his power to try to bring this title back to Maranello. He started in P19 and finished in P3. Carlos Sainz in P2. I mean, all it would have taken really was Lando going wide and losing it and losing focus for a split second, and this title could very well have gone the other way. But they clutched up, man. I mean, he gets some brownie points here. I think I mentioned that in one of my YouTube shorts, the quick reaction earlier this week. But Lando Norris did his job. The car was good. It was definitely able to fight this weekend. Ferrari, in my opinion, they might have even been quicker with Charles.
I think that's a fair argument. I think that's a very fair argument.
Like if Charles would have started P2 where Sainz was, I think there's a real chance that Ferrari might have actually won this past weekend, and that's going to set up a lot going into next season. But I mean, a genuine question, the emotional side of this, the McLaren fan, sitting across from me. How exciting is this for you? Like, what does it mean for you as a fan? Like, now that you've embraced this sport so much over the last year and a half?
I would say it means a lot more than I thought it was going to. You know what I mean? Like, going into the year, like, I became a McLaren fan when it wasn't very popular to be a McLaren fan. Just like, oh, I like McLaren because of Daniel Ricciardo, right? And then whenever Danny left, a lot of those people moved with Danny or picked another team. It's like, oh, who's winning, right? A lot of people became Max fans. A lot of people went to Mercedes. A lot of people went to Ferrari. I stuck as a McLaren fan for a few reasons. And it means a lot more than I thought it was going to. Like, jumping into this sport, I wasn't entirely sure how much I was going to, retain. I didn't know how much I was going to get involved, if it was just going to be one of those sports I kind of watch off to the side. And here I am, doing a podcast with you about it. And it's a sport that I indulge in as much as I can. And it's a sport that I love. And it's a sport that I keep up with. And it's a sport that I'm going to, when I have kids down the line or whatever, like, this is going to be a sport that stays with me. And I plan on McLaren being that team that I stay with. And it's just like if any other team wins your championship. Now, granted, it'd probably mean a little bit more if, the Rangers, Cowboys, whatever. And, another team that I've been a fan of for a longer time wins a championship. But this still hit me in the feels because it was like, look, man, this is a team that when I started becoming a fan of was, P6, P5, P7s, and the Constructors. Like, we weren't really, it wasn't all too, we were, I would say we were the equivalent of like what Aston Martin is right now.
I mean, last year, for instance, because you're, very fresh fan. I'm not going to pretend like I've been a fan of the sport for forever either. But
right.
Like, I remember where they were last year even. Starting last year.
You literally went from last to first.
Quite literally in last place to developing the car, sticking with their trajectory, to starting to fight for wins last year, right? Obviously, Max dominated the field. The only other team to win was Ferrari in Singapore. But you saw it starting to come together and moving in the right direction. And there was a lot of stuff to be excited about and be hopeful for. To see just even the 1 year progression of starting in Bahrain in 2023 as a DNF and a Windows update on the steering wheel and everything just looking like it was going to be a disaster, to being able to start fighting for wins, to be kind of creeping closer to the front, to now be Constructors champions. I think it shows a lot. It shows, the persistence that McLaren had to not only their own development track, to their own system, to their own network, to their own people, right? The people behind the scenes who help really bring these things together, right? To believe in that trajectory, to believe in that plan, to believe in a guy like Zach Brown to lead it all, as the team CEO, Andrea Stella as the team principal.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because if I could jump in here for a minute, you had to re-sign Lando to that deal that they signed him to. Mm-hmm. You had to convince Oscar Piastri to leave Alpine, to come to McLaren, break his contract with Alpine, pay that money. You had to convince Oscar to move. You took the risk of getting rid of Danny. Zach took the risk. For those who don't know about how Zach Brown got into F1, it's a really incredible story. That was a risk in and of itself. And him taking his own, I would say, the decision into his own hands to, I don't want to say step down, but take a different role, and hiring Andrea Stella and just kind of like you said, just staying with it, and not like nobody in the pit wall, nobody back at this facility. None of the drivers. It doesn't seem like anybody wavered. They all just maintained belief.
You can take it all the way back to like Fernando Alonso when he was still with the team. I mean, this is a team at one point that struggled to get sponsors, right? They had to go outside of their own organization and restructure financially and bring in new investors, and like they really had to rebuild this team.
And now
McLaren,
that car's tattooed with sponsors.
Oh yeah,
you got Google Chrome on the wheels. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So, but all that to say, like sticking with that development trajectory and believing in this team and seeing just how far they've come in such, over these last few years even. I mean, they earned it. They earned it every step of the way. And they've obviously taken parts of this season. We've been as praiseworthy as I'm being right now. I'm not going to pretend like I wasn't critical.
Oh, yeah. Even I was, yeah.
Yeah, they had to figure things out as it came to them. They weren't expecting to be in this fight at this point within their own pit wall. You know what I mean? So, waxing poetic about McLaren, they earned this, man. And they clutched up when they needed to. It says a lot about this team that now, going into 2025, there's not an expectation of like, maybe we might get a couple race wins. This is a team that now believes week in, week out, Grand Prix to Grand Prix, that we can win races and we can compete for championships, not just in the Constructors, but maybe even the Drivers' Championship. And we're going to have a lot to say about what next year could look like. We have our bold predictions coming up at some point in this episode. But in the present, as it stands right now, I mean, McLaren they've done it. They've done it. It's huge. 9 Constructors' Championships from a team perspective. The first Constructors' Championship since 1998, the days of like Mika Hakkinen, for instance. That's incredible. And that is something to be excited about. And that brings a whole lot to the storylines that we're going to have going into 2025. It brings a lot to talk about this entire offseason. Ending the season on a high with a Lando Norris win. That's huge. That's huge. You're the most recent winner, and you get to sit on that win for the next few months and be excited about that.
Yeah. That's massive. It's absolutely massive. And, we'll talk more about McLaren in the Oscar and Lando fight and, whose driver won. I think it's going to be Lando. I think me and Tristan sat down and watched the race, and Lando said something very interesting whenever he did win. Obviously, he thanked everybody in the pit wall and everybody like that. But, he pretty much proclaimed, like, hey, next year's going to be my year. Like, all the things I didn't know going into this year, I know. And next year's going to be my year.
We'll see.
And I've been very critical of that. But I don't want to do the Lando critical train right now.
No, right now
take the win.
Brace.
We're basking in the win. I'm trying to get me some championship merch.
Yeah.
I got to get a couple of posters up in there. It feels great, but I'm excited. It makes me. I can't lie. I feel really juiced to do this pod. I mean, obviously for our listeners.
No, this is.
I started it off because I was like, I'm just ready. I'm just ready to go. This is
your opportunity to do your victory lap. You know what I mean?
This is me doing the burnouts. This is me doing the donuts.
These are your donuts, man. So congratulations to you. Congratulations to the McLaren team. I mean, again, it was super, super earned, and for the fan base that is really growing here in the States, by the way. I mean, you can call it whatever it is, but like, man, that merch, it does say something. I've got McLaren merch hanging in my closet.
It's hard not to.
You know what I mean? They got some drip out there. If you're going to bring anybody into this sport, bring them in, looking good, right? McLaren at least have started to open up that door for people. It's huge. It's huge. So excited for you guys. I'll give you a nice little clap into the microphone here. But obviously, there were a lot more things that happened this past weekend, most notably the farewell at Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton's final race.
Extremely emotional weekend.
Incredibly emotional. And for this team that Lewis Hamilton has won 6 championships with as the driver, 8 Constructors titles with this team. So many wins, so much unprecedented success over the tenure of this partnership that I think 12 or 13 years long. And packed up for the final time before his move down the paddock to Ferrari. I mean, it was a drive to remember for the 7-time world champion. I mean, look, Lewis started in P16 in this race after a crazy qualifying, like you couldn't have predicted it. Kevin Magnussen just happening to hit a bollard and sending Lewis all the way back to P16 during his final, push lap. And even a huge overtake on his own teammate, George Russell, to land in P4 just off the podium. Look, Lots of memories made. Even Lando Norris had a pretty funny comment about this entire situation this weekend, about the farewell, effectively like saying, look, guys,
he's not dying, guys.
He's not dying. He's not retiring. Like, and then Lewis responding to that in the media, like, he has no clue what his retirements are going to look like. If this is how much love and like how much attention him just leaving Mercedes got, looking a few years down the road, I mean, what is that going to look like? I'll ask you a soft prediction. Do you think he Dwayne Wade's it and like tells everybody, or like Kobe Bryant's it and like tells everybody at the beginning of the year, like, hey guys, like this is going to be my farewell tour?
I think
the ticket sales would go crazy.
I mean, as if they aren't already, right? It'd be like $20,000 to get a ticket in Las Vegas.
Oh my goodness. Just get general grandstand.
Yeah. F1 wants that. I tell you that much. They want that for the money. Yeah, they want the farewell tour. I think there will be a farewell tour. I think you can capitalize on the merch, you can capitalize on the sales, you can capitalize on just everything like that, but also it'll just mean more. Lewis racing in his last race, and oh my God, I'm just thinking about it. His last race in Silverstone, oh my God.
Oh, it's going to be crazy. They're going to have to pack in more seats.
Like that's going to be an insane, like, you know what I mean? But before we move on, I do want to try to bring a little tear to your eye. Whoa. If I could write a tear to your ear, that'd be a new
might need to go get checked.
Some team radio from Lewis to Bono, quote, what started out as a leap of faith turned into a journey into the history books. So we did everything together, and I'm so grateful to everyone from the bottom of my heart. All the best. And I think the beginning of that quote weighs so heavy. Like that's like some generational, what started out as a leap of faith turned into a journey into the history books. And that is so crazy to think about, because it was.
We talked about this earlier in the week after watching that race. This at the time when Lewis made the move from McLaren to Mercedes were like, they were not considered a team that was going to be a championship fight. Like, they had Nico Rosberg, and then they had Schumacher, and then Lewis coming in to pair up alongside Nico. At the time, it was not seen as this is a team that's going to be fighting for championships. This is a middling team at best. They're not contenders. And Niki Lauda being a huge part of bringing Lewis Hamilton into the Mercedes fold, a huge part of that relationship with the team. It was a real leap of faith. I mean, for me, obviously, I wasn't the fan I am now at that time. So I go back and I watch other pieces of media. I'm a Top Gear fan. I was going back and watching all those old episodes before the final Ground Tour episode. And like, there's an episode where Jeremy Clarkson is basically like telling Lewis, like, this is a foolish decision. Like, why would you make this decision? And Lewis just talking about how much he believed in what they had going into this, the era that they had of pure dominance. And it really paid off. It was a leap of faith at the time. And I mean, it was a very special weekend overall. I mean, a strong year overall. I will say, like, a couple of wins for Lewis this year, and especially after last year, did not look like this is a team that could win, not championships, but win Grand Prix. But Toto Wolff even saying in a social media post as part of those farewells, you deserve a car that can win. So now moving down the paddock to Ferrari, what's the potential there? I mean, I
think the potential is strong.
Yeah. Looking at where Ferrari are now, I mean, this lineup is insane.
Well, I want to correct you a little bit, if I may.
Okay.
Looking at how strong Charles is right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that Ferrari doesn't look strong, because they have had a stellar year. And I'm not dismissing Carlos at all, because we've said in the past that we love the move that Carlos is making to Williams, and we think that that's going to do big numbers in the future. A little bit on that in my bold predictions later on. But okay. I think specifically, if you wanted to look at it overall, I think there's at least a real argument that Charles has been the best driver. Obviously, we know what Max can do. I think there's at least an argument to be made that Charles has been the most surprising / best driver this year overall. With what kind of car he has and everything like that, I think And I know that there's going to be some Max fans in there, and I think I can already see it brewing in your head. Like, well, Max has had it, and he's had a dominating run. But Charles has been absolutely fantastic this year, especially on the tail end of this year.
I think you could really make an argument that Charles is number 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, I think that's a fair. I think it goes Max, and then like Charles Lando argument is probably where I'm sitting. But nevertheless, we're not trying to sit here and make a list on and do a debate on who's who, but Charles has had a fantastic year. Like I said, he's finished out the year about as perfect as you can finish it. Brought Ferrari, essentially catapulted Ferrari into what turned into another battle for the constructors, because at first they were out of it.
Yeah, I mean they had to surpass Red Bull. They did a very good job. Were very effective. Carlos Sainz obviously deserves flowers within that as well,
of course,
but I mean, Charles is, of course, the number 1 within that pairing. And Charles proved again this past weekend just how good he can be when the car is there, when the car is dialed in. Had to take that 10th-place grid penalty because they had to change a battery, if I'm not mistaken, on the car. Exceeded their limit.
Not the Duracell for Williams.
Not the Duracell for Williams. But they had to change a key component, took the penalty. And like I said earlier in this podcast, I think if you put Charles in the front, he's fighting with Lando the whole way, and I think he really puts him under pressure.
Right.
I would say personally that I think Charles is better than Lando.
I think that's a fair argument. I think me and you talked about that over the weekend, and I agreed. I think Charles in the McLaren wins the drivers.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean to say that Lando can't get better.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, he can. He's already said that he's going to try to get better based on what he learns, and we'll figure that out in the future. That's for him to prove. But as how things sit right now, I do think Charles is the better driver.
Well, and looking at this lineup that Ferrari are going to have going into next season, I mean, they made mincemeat of the final race this weekend. Lewis starting in P16, Charles starting in P19. Charles passed Lewis, by the way. And Lewis still finished P4, P3 for Charles. I think they collectively had like 30 plus like positions gained between the two of them this weekend. And they were on the ball. When either of these guys, we've seen it over the course of their careers, have the right car and it's dialed in, they're going to be fighting for the race win. Ferrari now have the best driver pairing going into 2025. Mm-hmm. That is dangerous.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see how the dynamics work within that team. Obviously, Lewis bringing all of his past success in, obviously the elder within this duo.
I mean, Lewis won't be driver 1 anymore.
That's the question. That's where I was kind of leading it. Like, who really is the driver 1 within this team? Charles has been with the team for a long time, and right now it looks like he's really hitting his peak. Right? Like, this is the best form of Charles we'll probably see. Going into next year, there's a real chance that Leclerc could be fighting for the Drivers' Championship alongside a team that could very well be fighting for a Constructors' Championship. And he's got the greatest, if not one of the greatest Formula One drivers alongside him next year.
I see, and these are probably things that they talked about before Lewis, signed the dotted line on this contract, but yeah, I am curious. Like, in my head, I'm thinking they're rolling into 25, and they're like, look, Charles is our number 1. We understand who you are, Lewis. We understand everything. We also understand.
I don't think it's that clear cut.
You don't think so?
I don't think so in the slightest. I just don't. And seeing Lewis these past few years,
he's still got it. He's still got it.
When the car isn't quite dialed in, still being able to compete and really bring it. I mean, this is going to be the toughest test, I think, for Leclerc in his career. He had to drive against Sebastian Vettel when he was first coming into Ferrari. And then, Carlos Sainz being his teammate. Carlos is not a scrub, right?
But Charles is better.
But now you have Lewis, who is going to be hopping into a car that, like I just mentioned, could very well be in line to win championships next year. He wants his 8th. He fought against Nico Rosberg. As long as the car is underneath him, Lewis doesn't take prisoners, man.
Or the other side of this argument, do they just kind of let him go free and, hey, we've had 2 very good drivers.
Race clean.
And just Ferrari rules.
Yeah. I don't know. What would they call it? Pony rules? Like the horse.
Something like that.
I'm sure we'll hear something about that next year.
And you know what else we'll hear about? We'll still hear about Max Verstappen and that Red Bull team.
That's true.
Don't think we can't forget about him.
Look, and Red Bull, by the way, still have some real questions they need to answer.
A big old fat question mark.
A big question, because Checo is the odd man out in 2025. He is all but off of this team at this point. The media that I've been consuming has more or less suggested that they're basically in the final stages of figuring out how we wrapping this thing up. He's not going to be on the team next year. You know it, I know it. Red Bull have obviously had a lot of meetings about this, and I believe they have a shareholder meeting this upcoming weekend to discuss who the driver across from Verstappen is going to be. They're just working out the terms of, getting Checo's contract taken care of, right? So I guess I'm going to pose this to you. Who is going to be the driver across from Max Verstappen in the Red Bulls in 2025?
Man, that's such a hard question because, you really don't know. I would love to know, how did Yuki look in post Abu Dhabi racing?
In the testing?
Yeah, how did Liam also? Who all from Red Bull, that Red Bull team, did anything post Abu Dhabi?
I don't think Liam was a part of testing. I think they had Isaac Hadjar driving the V-Carb and Yuki was driving the Red Bull.
And I think that means something.
Red Bull have suggested it doesn't.
I know they don't, but I don't know. I think they're going to... But here's the thing.
I'm going to press you on it.
I am. I feel pressed.
Who is going to be the driver alongside Max Verstappen? Liam Lawson or Yuki Tsunoda? Because we've had this conversation for effectively the last 4 or 5 months. But right now, as we are about to find out within probably the next few days, this podcast is going to drop and then we'll probably get those news. But
or our luck, that'll drop whenever we leave here.
Right.
Look.
But it's coming down the pipe. I mean, it's going to happen.
I think there's two answers to this.
No, well, yes.
Hold on. There's 2 answers to this. Just give me a minute. I think it's going to be Yuki, and here's my 2 reasons why.
Okay.
I think it's going to be Yuki. One, because the position that Liam is in is the position Yuki used to be in. When they passed Yuki, he was young and he was developing. Liam is in that position now. So I think that's what they're going to do. They're going to do to Liam what they did to Yuki in the past. And I think they're going to give Yuki a fair shot. But I don't necessarily think they're going to be like, hey, Yuki, here's your seat and this is your seat for the year. Hey, Yuki, here's your seat until further notice. If you mess it up, we have other guys. We will pull Hadjar. We will pull Lawson. We will do whatever we need to do.
Red Bull have done things like that in the past, most notably with Pierre Gasly, with Alex Albon, right? Yep. And in doing that, it wasn't as effective as they wanted it to be. Because, I mean, obviously Max is such a dominant talent. You're really just deciding who's going to be the best person to clean up points.
Yeah, you just want someone to come in there and be like, hey, here's your interview. Are you going to perform like Checo? And they say yes or they say no. And you're like, oh, well, we need someone who doesn't do that.
However, because of that history, I think that Christian Horner and company are not trying to be as cutthroat. They really want to give drivers the feel that this is going to be your seat. We want you to settle in and not be as nervous. Because having that be in the back of your mind constantly is one thing. Like having it super present is another thing.
I think they're going to bring in Yuki, and that's what I think they're going to do. That's what I think makes sense, and that's what I hope that they do, because I think Yuki deserves his shot.
And I agree with you. I think it's going to be Tsunoda. And he had a really strong end of the season. He outperformed Lawson, I think, in all 6 races that almost all 6 races that Lawson was a part of. And he retired Danny Rick, more or less. I think it's going to be Yuki. And it's one of those deals where Yuki has been a part of this system and a part of this program, whether Horner and Marco necessarily we're going to pick him. Obviously, there's a lot of ties to the Honda partnership, but Yuki is a real talent. He is very, very good. And I think he's done enough to earn it. He's raced alongside Pierre Gasly, who you had in that seat, and then demoted him down to, at the time, AlphaTauri. And now Pierre Gasly's doing some very solid things, by the way, with Alpine, which we're going to talk about shortly. But Yuki raced very well against him. Not necessarily outright beating Pierre, but Yuki's developed very, very strongly these last couple seasons. I mean, Nick DeVries was his teammate last year and was cut for Liam Lawson and Daniel Ricciardo, last year. And Yuki's just held strong and performed well within a car that's just not quite there. I think Red Bull see Lawson potentially as somebody that he's competing close to where Yuki is, and he has competed close to Yuki within these final 6 races with a lot less experience. There's a belief there that maybe Lawson, with more time, is going to be a better driver than Yuki. However, I think next year it's going to be Yuki. It's going to be Lawson in the V-Carb alongside Isaac Hadjar. If Yuki sucks, Red Bull are very cutthroat. They're going to give him a little bit of cushion, but not as much cushion as Sergio Perez got this year.
No way.
Sergio cost them a constructors. He cost them millions of dollars in prize money.
Christian's not going to let that happen again.
In bonuses, et cetera, et cetera. It's not going to be like that. Red Bull, I think, are still going to be in that fight to win races next year. Do I think they're going to be a favorite to win a constructors and a drivers? No. But I think they're going to be competitive. Max Verstappen is still your driver 1. He's going to be disgusting. He just is. But I think Yuki Tsunoda's...
I'm at the point now where you could give Max a go-kart from Mario, and he's going to still contend for wins at this rate.
All I'm getting at is I think Yuki has been more than prepared for this moment. I think it's fair. And this is the direction I see it going in. And I'm going to be really excited because you and I are both fans of Yuki. I think that both of us would be very excited about this. I think most of the F1 world and most of the F1 fandom, people who listen to this podcast, probably feel like they like Yuki Tsunoda, and he's more or less earned it. If you're going to look at who is available to Red Bull within their own network, Yuki Tsunoda is their best option right now. Now on the grid, we have to go though. There are other teams that race this weekend, and
we show all the love.
We got to give them a little bit of attention here. Aston Martin, they finished P5 in the Constructors' Championship, and Fernando Alonso landed P9 to finish the season. A pedestrian finish for Lance Stroll in Abu Dhabi in P14. This team is basically waiting for Adrian Newey. Is there really anything else to say? Not really. No. Okay. Pierre Gasly, however, like we just mentioned a moment ago, a massive drive to secure P6 in the Constructors' title fight with Haas. And you know what? He proved us wrong. Definitely. Alpine and Pierre Gasly proved us wrong.
They definitely did.
We thought that they were going to fall back to earth after that insane Brazil 2-3. Certainly one of the high points, if not the high point for this team over the last few years. A team that's had so much going on behind the scenes, but they proved us wrong, man. They saw their opportunity to really secure a lot more prize money, and they were like, we had these developments we were going to bring to the car next year, but
now they can
let's
spend
slap
it on
them
more
on right now.
Now they can spend it on more stupid liveries next year. Run back the Levi livery and Deadpool and
oh my goodness,
what else they're going to do?
Well, I wish they would keep that pink. I do
like the pink. The pink looks good.
I like the pink a lot more than like the mix match. So I hope they keep the pink on the livery next year.
Please don't bring back the Levi jeans. Please.
Are you that's V-Carb.
I know. Oh yeah, you're right. That is V-Carb. So Alpine did the Deadpool.
They did Deadpool Wolverine, and they did
what was the other one that they did? I know they did another one.
They did do another one. Indiana Jones.
That's right.
The video game. Yeah. And that one it was like a pseudo papaya. Yeah, it was weird. V-Carb with a solid P8. We talked about them more or less at length. I mean, the junior team for Red Bull. They're coming along. They didn't finish in last, and that's something to be notable about. Williams, P9, but a lot of growth and excitement coming.
The word for Williams this year is just...
into the wall.
Just destruction.
Yeah. I mean, I don't expect next year to be nearly as rough on them as this year. You've got a collection of better drivers, in my opinion. Like, Albon's not going to put it in the wall, and I really would be shocked if Carlos Sainz is struggling enough to put it in the wall a lot, like as many times as they did this year too.
I mean, it was just insane.
Yeah.
Week after week after week. And, Logan Sargent sitting on his couch, he didn't help that at all.
Yeah. Unfortunate for Franco Colapinto, who, by the way, also didn't finish again this weekend. So wrapped up his Williams tenure with, I think, 4 straight DNFs. Not how you want things to finish.
No, not a good weekend.
But they certainly can't crash any more than they did this year,
Hey,
right?
you know what? The year's over.
The year is over. The year is over. I'm going to be very curious to see if they unfortunately had to break the budget cap to keep the cars on track, because the amount of damage was absurd.
It was absurd, yeah.
But I dropped that soundbite as a just in case for next season when we can come back to this and clip it and say, didn't you say last year how they weren't supposed to crash more? Sauber finished in P10. I don't know if you saw much of this in the media. Valtteri Bottas basically flipping them the proverbial bird on the way out, saying the switch from Mercedes to Sauber was a mistake. Zhou Guanyu's future is going to be a mystery.
3 straight years of a mistake.
Yeah, basically. The Mercedes relationship was what it was. Obviously, bringing George Russell in was the correct decision at the time. Valtteri, one of the best wingmen, period, right? Never missed a Q3, et cetera, et cetera. It'd be shocking to see Valtteri on the grid next year for Red Bull, but, you never know. But they're moving forward. They're looking forward to Gabriel Bortoleto and Nico Hülkenberg next season as they transition to Audi in 2026. So that kind of just wraps their season. They finished with like 4 points.
4 points.
Notable thing for Zhou Guanyu, he had just as many points as Sergio Perez over the final 6 races of the season. So that was pretty cool. But I'm very curious to see where Zhou Guanyu ends up. I'll put it out there in the ether. I know he's not done racing. I'm curious if he ends up as a reserve driver for someone next year or in someone's system. A lot of guys go to the WEC, the World Endurance Championships. I think Kevin Magnussen is going WEC as well. But just up and down the grid, some interesting final races for a few of our other drivers. Personal top 5 moments of 2024, though.
I'm excited for this.
This year was absolutely littered with insane moments, drama, hype. I mean, it delivered in so many ways. After the Max Verstappen beatdown of 2023, 2024, for some people, is one of the greatest F1 seasons of all time. For me, as a newer fan to this sport, I'm putting that out there again. This has been the best season for me personally.
Oh yeah, big fan of this season personally over here from the Papaya team.
Oh, it was awesome. So I wanted us to have our own personal top 5s here. This is not an objective top 5. This is a what did it mean to Kevin Walker? What did it mean to Tristan Rines?
And whatever we say is right, and y'all are wrong.
And you know what? TLPs, I guess it's what we're going to be calling our audience here. If you guys have a personal top 5, absolutely drop it in the comment sections. We want to hear from you guys.
Or even if y'all have like a top moment from listening this year, maybe listening to Tristan go on a rant, or
the multitude of Checo rants.
If anybody out there has an count for how many times I've said this year, thinking of something when Tristan puts me on the spot. If anybody's got any top 5, the lap podcast moments, throw those out.
That would be a pretty cool compilation. I would listen to it. So if you want to do that groundwork, awesome. We will love you forever.
Just type it in. You can type it in. You don't got to go do Adobe.
Our personal top 5 moments of 2024.
You have an honorable mention, right?
We also have an honorable mention, I believe.
Yeah, I have one.
Okay.
I have one.
I have one as well. So I'm going to start with you. We're going to snake order this like we've done in the past with everything else. Number 5. Your number 5 moment for this 2024 season.
I have a strong feeling my number 5 might be like up there for you, but for me,
it's your personal one. That's
my number 5 is going to be Lewis winning in Silverstone.
Okay. I like it. I do like it, and that's completely fair for you. And why did that land on your number 5?
Well, I mean, it was such an emotional race. I mean, we talked earlier about how crazy it would be in his farewell tour racing in Silverstone. But him winning in Silverstone in his final year with Mercedes, it was like a storybook. I don't want to say storybook ending because it wasn't, but it was like a storybook type of chapter there where you wanted to see it happen, and it happened in front of his fans, in front of the crowd. And it was really touching moment. It was really emotional. It was just all around beautiful.
For me, my number 5, McLaren's first title since 1998. Now, similarly to you, the moment it just means something different for me.
Right.
Very, 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 very cool though. After like such a wild ride to this season, McLaren bringing it home, taking the journey over these past few tumultuous years, as we mentioned towards the top of this episode. I mean, it was a ride this year, up and down, left and right, whatever, but it was well earned. So for me, it lands on my number 5. Seeing all that hard work come to, its natural ending, the celebration for that team. That was awesome. Number 4, Lando Norris's first win in Miami. That's my number 4. Where the tide of the season started to really turn, in my opinion. Not quite fully, but it started to turn there. McLaren had a lucky break that day. Certainly my feeling that day, but kept developing, and they kept proving they deserved it. Lando now has 4 wins for his career all this season, but an awesome moment for him to stick with McLaren and finally see that pay off. The driver, somewhat almost a parade coming around Hard Rock Stadium and all giving him the thumbs up and clapping and hugs and embraces. Like, seeing how much that meant for Lando Norris and for McLaren was very, very special. Your number 4.
My number 4 is Charles winning in Monaco. The Monegasque winning in Monaco after so many years of DNFs or just something going wrong with the car where he couldn't perform and win or even compete sometimes in Monaco. I mean, I kind of think about, obviously, I'm not from Monaco. I'm not Monegasque. But I think about it as if, to kind of put myself in his shoes, to literally race in like mere streets away from where you grew up as a kid has to be such an insane experience. And to win in a Ferrari, mind you, I mean, that it's kind of like we talked about, like I said with the Lewis, it's like the icing on top of the cake. And it was just like a storybook chapter, just such a beautiful moment. So that's my number 4. My number 3, and I don't know if this is going to make your top 5, but I'm going to think about this for a really long time. That dominant win in Sao Paulo by Max in the rain. I'm going to think about that drive for a long time.
Okay. Number 3 for me is Charles Leclerc's win in Monaco. I mean, it was poetry. I mean, you voiced a lot of my feelings as well with this, but it was such a defining moment for Charles' career. And the celebration, the win in Monaco in front of his countrymen, in front of his family, like knowing the story of like his dad passing and him kind of lying at the time to his dad that he was going to be driving for Ferrari, eventually getting that drive not so much longer after that point. But seeing how much it meant for him, like hearing the emotion of the onboards and seeing the interactions that he had on the grid, the photos, like I get emotional like thinking about it, because just seeing how much it meant for him and how much it meant in the sport and how much it meant for everybody. And it honestly, it was just a truly magical moment. If you're a Ferrari fan, this is like maybe the number 1 moment for you. Yeah. And Charles is he seems like a really good guy, like a good person. So it's nice to root for somebody that's like you deem like worthy of that and see him win in such a like magnificent way. Like, again, pure poetry. My number 2 is the Max Verstappen drive in Sao Paulo. I mean, it was one of, and we praised it for like 20 minutes after that weekend. It was one of the all-time drives in the history of Formula One. I truly feel that way. It's a race we're going to be talking about for like the rest of our lives. And it basically wrapped up the driver's title at the time as well. Yeah. Lando was still within striking distance, had gotten the sprint win just the day before in better conditions, but to drive through what was basically like, in F1 terms, basically hurricane conditions, it was such an incredible drive. Like, that's a race that I might go back and rewatch myself, just because so much had to go right on top of that. But he just, like the red flags, the yellow flags, the crashes, the incidents, everything about that weekend that could have derailed it for him, his pure, unadulterated talent just superseded all of that as well. So, like, hats off to Max. That was an incredible drive. Number 1, is it on me now? I
think you did your 3 and 2, yes?
Yeah. So now it's your 2. Your 2.
My number 2, and I just hear me out. My number 2 is the win in Abu Dhabi in clinching the Constructors.
Number 2?
Yes.
Okay.
That's my number 2 because my number 1 is Miami.
Your number 1 is Miami? Okay.
And here's why.
Yeah, these are 2 Lando wins, so like contextualize them for me.
The win in Miami proved to everybody, like there was a lot of talks like, look, Lando's a championship driver. He's a championship driver. We see Lando as a championship driver. We just need to give him a championship car. The year started off, it was a Max domination. It was like, all right, here, cue the GTA meme. Oh, crap, here we go again, blah, 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 whatever. And it was like, okay, it's going to be another year. Max wins, blah, 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 whatever. And yeah, you're right. A lot of things had to go right. He didn't pass anybody necessarily on merit. It was a win in the States. So I remember it very vividly. I was working a show at the time, and It was in the States, so I was actually able to, watch the whole race and see the overtake and see him take the win. And I just remember how excited I was.
Mm-hmm.
All the Lando no-wins, Norris got put to bed. And it was like, dude, at that time, we weren't thinking about constructors. We weren't thinking about a driver's championship. We were just like, holy crap, dude, Lando freaking won a race.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in Miami. I don't know. For me, it was a moment I'll remember for a long, long time. And it was just like, at that time, if you would have told me what happened now at that time, I would have been like, no, you're crazy. Lando hasn't been able to win in forever.
Mm-hmm.
And for him to get 4 wins this year, and I know I complained about it off air to you, especially a few weeks ago, about Lando saying essentially like, look, we came into this year and we didn't know we were going to win. From a competitor standpoint, that sucks to hear, but it's understandable. He's a young guy. He had to learn a lot. And then thankfully, the guy that he had to learn from is probably going to end up being on the Mount Rushmore of one of the best drivers of all time in Max. And so I say all that to say the win in Miami, at that moment, look, I was at that point, I was like, look, I don't even care what happens for the rest of the year. Lando won a freaking race.
Mm-hmm.
And it just meant the world. And the only reason why that trumps the Constructors win is, I don't want to say it was a given that McLaren was going to win the Constructors, but once we kind of see how things are falling, Red Bull literally falling, Ferrari kind of chasing, but it was going to take a lot for them to catch up / beat us. And I saw how Lando and Oscar had that car humming. It kind of seemed like, okay, McLaren should win this. The only way they lose this is if they fall apart. And if they fall apart, then they don't deserve it in the first place. Not to say that it wasn't beautiful and it wasn't a great experience, but that win in Miami, I don't know, man. It just kind of solidified why I became a McLaren fan, because just like, everybody in the facility and everything, like I believed in McLaren and I believed in the direction they were going and everything like that. And, and when they paid all that money to Alpine to get Oscar, and they forked out all this money and they made all these moves, and everybody was like, I'm not a McLaren fan anymore, whatever. Like, they got rid of Danny Rick. Like, I hate McLaren. I stuck with McLaren, and that Miami win was just like, look, I made the right choice because this team is going in the right direction. And here we are, December 11th, going into what would be December 12th when this gets posted, and we're the freaking Constructors champions. And none of that momentum, none of that starts with that win in Miami.
Yeah. I mean, that's a beautiful way of describing it. And I mean, with all of that, I don't know how to follow that as my number one, but I mean, you mentioned it earlier. Your number 5 is my number 1.
Yeah.
Lewis Hamilton's 9th win in Silverstone. And this was, for me, incredibly special because it was my first time as an F1 fan seeing Lewis win. Mm-hmm. Like, straight up. I started becoming a fan around 2022, got super into it, watched every race as much as I kind of hated it last year. Just like how, it was kind of boring, of course. We've talked about like how incredibly unprecedented it was, but like it was a slog last year to be an F1 fan, especially my first year being an F1 fan, and like seeing how much Mercedes were struggling. And then to see them kind of like, to see them start to make moves towards the front a little bit, but Lewis getting that win in Silverstone, like winning in front of the home crowd, that much emotion, like the picturesque moments of him like waving, the British flag like over the car, and seeing how much it meant to him. Like his parents were both there, his entire family were there, seeing how much it meant for the team, for Toto and company to finally deliver Lewis a win for the first time since 2021. Because remember, the last time Mercedes had even won a race was in Brazil 2022, and that was George Russell. So for Lewis to finally win, even in his final season with Mercedes, for me, the poetry of it all and my first opportunity to really see my favorite driver win was awesome. So for both of us this year, we both got to see our favorite drivers win for the first time. And understanding the success that Lewis had prior to like me really becoming a fan of the sport, setting all that aside, you don't really forget your first win generally, but as a fan, for me, that was my first time seeing somebody like I really wanted to see win finally make it happen. So that was awesome. In front of the home crowd, I mean, every picture, for the longest time I had the picture of him on top of the car, like with the flag and whatnot. I'm not British or anything, but that's just such a great picture, such a cool snapshot.
Because
that
you
was
know
like
what
my
it means to
wallpaper.
him.
Yeah.
You know,
100%.
and you got to take that in. You know what it means to him. You know what it means to Mercedes, and you know what it means to those fans.
Yeah, I mean, it means to a lot of fans all over the world as well. It was just finally seeing it happen was awesome. And I remember waking up my wife with how excited I was, because I woke up to watch the race, and she decided to sleep in on a good Sunday. And we're American fans. We don't get to watch all these things live. Thankfully, F1 TV has those replays and everything. But I watched lap 1 all the way through, and sat there and enjoyed all the excitement, and it was awesome. It really was a special Sunday. We have honorable mentions?
I have 2.
You have 2 honorable mentions?
I had 1, and then I thought about it, and I was like, oh no, I got to mention this.
Okay, well, we can go out of order on this, so you can start.
Okay, my first honorable mention, I almost gave it away. My first honorable mention is that Alpine lockout at the bottom of the podium.
The 2-3?
The 2-3. Same.
Okay.
It's another moment in Sao Paulo, but as much as it is that I don't like Alpine, I guess there's like a rivalry-ish between Alpine and McLaren. For me personally, I guess anyway. It's hard for me not to root for a team that comes out of nowhere and just, has a good weekend.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you could not...
I think we both feel different ways about that weekend. Not because, I don't think that it was exciting for Alpine, but as somebody who had seen Haas work so hard that year.
Yeah.
We talked about it the weekend, following, where I was like, I feel gutted for Haas. Even though, we're excited, but, I felt so much worse for Haas. But, Alpine obviously made good on, what that effort meant.
I understand that.
Yeah.
You could argue that Alpine does not deserve the P6 and the Constructors finishing 7 points ahead of Haas. But Haas had their opportunity also to make up those points before the end of the year. You know what I mean?
Yep. That's the beauty of the sport as well. You can feel one way about it, but the reality is, at the end of the day, it's in black and white right in front of you. That's how sports are sometimes.
So that's my that's one of my honorable mentions is the Alpine 2-3.
My honorable mention, and I've only got the one, but that's a good one. With all due respect, that's a very good one. For me, my honorable mention was Max versus Lando in Austria, because I'm a Mercedes fan. So the late collision into the race, the controversy, the excitement, the drama were all there. And this was another moment where McLaren were just hot on Red Bull's heels. At this time, Red Bull were still trying to stave off the competition. So just for the full context of this moment, it was still insane at the time watching that all play out. And Red Bull, with a bad stop, they felt like they had gotten infringed on, not giving the space, and just seeing that controversy leading into Silverstone, and it finally starting to go away from them. I think that was the real first opportunity for Red Bull to realize, this thing is the tide is flipped. We reached a ceiling, and this championship is not going to just be ours just because it has been, right? So much happens within the context of this race. And through it all, George Russell being there to pick up the pieces for their first win as a team since 2022, that same Brazil Grand Prix. What an insane ending for me. I remember being incredibly excited about it. A win's a win's a win. The same way that Alpine got that 2-3. You can feel the exact same way about Mercedes. They didn't earn that win the same way, but you got to be there to be there.
You got to make the right decisions to be there. Yeah.
Exactly. And for me, that was my first time really seeing the team win since I'd become a fan. So it's a special moment in general for somebody who started to really pay attention and really get invested and really care about this team and this unit. In 2022, I was watching highlights, trying to still learning the sport.
Yeah.
And to finally see my team gather a win was awesome. So for me, that's the honorable mention, was watching George Russell pick up those pieces and win. And then obviously the next weekend was crazy.
2 words for my honorable mention. 2 words.
What?
Papaya rules.
Oh, are you talking about Monza?
Just in general, the whole papaya rules. What was it? A week or 2 that went on where it was we want Oscar to help Lando, and papaya rules. Mm-hmm. And it was look, if you want to win a driver's championship, then Oscar needs to help. It was just that whole thing. Mm-hmm. I'll always remember papaya rules and how stupid that sounds, and just
Just
how
the
we
controversy that came along.
Yeah,
with
the
all of it.
controversy that came along with like, hey, Oscar, we need you to like be a teammate for Lando so we can help Lando win at drivers. And then like ultimately it was like, hey, but actually, you know what? Like, we're gonna actually let you like win a couple of times too. And I don't know. It was
a mess.
A lot of things that McLaren did that didn't make sense, and they just were like, hey, papaya rules.
If
Papaya
McLaren
rules.
go on to win like a championship next year or clear and win both championships, you can look back on these moments of frustration and be like, oh man, like remember when they used to just like fight each other and like it was a whole controversial thing? Yeah, like that'll be a moment to remember. But we'll see how next year goes. Speaking of next year, I want to wrap this final
I got some good ones.
send off for the season with our bold predictions. Obviously, we're going to have a few months of staring at the wall and wishing it was another Grand Prix weekend. I think every one of us, the TLPs, can all share in that sentiment.
We'll try to see if anything new or anything breaking comes out. We'll try to see what we can do.
And like if there's a monumental like Lewis Hamilton leaving for Ferrari kind of moment this offseason, we'll have an emergency podcast to officially like talk about that. But imagining that's not going to happen. What the bold predictions for 2025? I got 3 and no necessary timetables, but I've got some very bold predictions and I want to hear yours as well. And TLPs, if you got them, comment. Let us know. What do you think is going to happen in 2025 as it stands?
Make it bold. Make it bold.
Make it bold. Make it spicy. 12/12 is when this thing is dropping in 2024. We're not going to be back, and I hate to say it, until 2025.
Till next year.
Yeah, but we'll get there. Your first bold prediction. I'll let you lead off.
I'm going to start a little. I'm gonna let the oven. I'm gonna turn the oven on. I'm gonna put it on low, and then we're gonna increase it.
So
from
we're
there.
preheating.
Yeah, we're preheating right now.
Okay.
I think Williams will be in the fight and potentially grab P5 in the constructors next year.
Really?
Yeah.
That's actually pretty bold. I like that. I really like that. So you think Sainz and Albon and Williams are just going to have a year where they're all surprised going into 2026?
Yeah.
So, okay.
I'm talking multiple consecutive / multiple double points weekends. Gonna have a couple of weekends where I
you
think,
would need to consistently be hitting those bottom parts of the points to get.
Yeah, and I think they're gonna be doing that. I think they're gonna be making it into Q3 regularly.
So you think? Okay, I'm trying to like see where this is gonna like how it could make sense, and I don't think you're that far off. I think it's very bold still. Basically, Carlos Sainz brings in all of his knowledge from Ferrari and is like, "Look, this thing sucks. So here's what we can do to at least make this drivable."
I think the mind between him and James Vowles, I think they could really get something going. And Albon's a very consistent driver. We've talked about this in the past. You give him a good car. We know what Carlos can do in a good car. I think they can do really good things.
Okay. My first bold prediction. I've got. I didn't have these in order. You know what? I'll go out of order here. I think Kimi Antonelli is going to win a race next year as a rookie. I think that's my bold prediction. The Mercedes rookie is going to win a race at some point next season.
Now, do you think this is going to be like one of those situations where George is winning the race and they let Kimi win, kind of like Lando did with Oscar, or do you think Kimi's going to win on merit?
I
kind of putting you on the burner.
I didn't expect it to go that direction. George is for sure going to be the driver one, right? George is also a very consistent driver. If I had to really speculate, I think that George might let him through. But I love the idea that Kimi's going to win on merit. So I'm going to say Kimi wins on merit.
Okay.
Yeah.
These are bold.
I think Kimi wins one on merit. I've watched him in F2 all season. I didn't get to see much of him for the postseason testing. Apparently, he was really sick. He missed the final race of the F2 season because he was very sick. Kimi's nasty, dude. I believe in him. I really do. I'm excited to see what he does.
I know you believe in him.
Yeah. I mean, if you listen to this podcast all season, first off, thank you for listening as we wrap this one up. But
we're sorry.
But I've been saying it, man. He's the truth. My other hot take, bold prediction, I think Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris are going to battle all year for team supremacy, and it's going to cost them. We're going to see Brosades levels of like, no, it's my weekend. No, it's my weekend. Like, I think it's going to happen with McLaren. They're going to be duking it out all year. Like, as much as we like had the heat about the papaya rules, I think these guys are friendly, but they started to have to deal with those papaya rules with Lando already in the lead. I'm expecting Oscar to like really be bringing it from like the first Grand Prix of the weekend all the way through. Of the year, all the way through. So that's how I see it going down. And I think McLaren are going to be, of course, they're going to have the opportunity to fight for a title, but amid all of that, that's going to be one of those lineups where, like, dude, every given weekend, we're going to see sparks flying. It's going to be I think that's going to be the storyline all year. What's your second bold prediction?
My second bold prediction is practically the exact opposite.
You think they're going to be like best friends?
No, I think Lando will come back better than ever.
Okay.
And I think he will end McLaren's driver championship drought, and he will win the driver championship. I do follow that. This is where I don't necessarily disagree with you. I do follow that with Oscar getting a little pissed and him probably leaving after his contract is over in 26.
Oh, after in 26, the first year of the new regs?
I think if
2025
Lando
starts to push him over the edge.
I think if Lando can officially take over driver 1 and he wins he wins the drivers championship, I think Oscar understands, look, he's the driver 1 for the foreseeable future. And I know Oscar sees himself as a driver 1.
He would be. I think he is.
I also think he is.
Yeah, he is that talented.
And I've said this in the past. McLaren needs to take advantage of this situation while you have these two driver 1s on the same team as long as you can. But I think Lando comes back better than ever, wins the Constructors. But I think after 25, I think Oscar starts shopping around. Hey, where can I be driver 1 at?
All right, and your final bold prediction?
My final bold prediction. This goes directly against everything that you have said.
Okay.
I think Ferrari will not contend for a driver's or a constructor's championship title next year.
Really? Okay, because this is where we're going to differ. My final bold prediction. I think Ferrari take both titles.
Yeah.
And not only do I think they take both titles, I think Lewis Hamilton in his final, okay, I've got it year, I think he gets his 8th world title next year.
I don't think...
That's my bold
Now,
prediction.
Here's why. I think Ferrari's going to find a way to Ferrari this. This has nothing to do with Lewis. This has nothing to do with Charles. This has something to do with Ferrari getting the talent that they need in the car and just somehow finding a way to screw it up. And I don't mean that, and this doesn't mean, Ferrari's going to finish P5. No. That's not what I'm saying.
So you think the clown car is back in town? Is that what I'm hearing?
I'm not saying that. I think they're going to have a very similar season
this year into next, where they finish P2.
Where they're still trying to figure out that car. Where that Lewis partnership alongside that Ferrari team, they're still trying to figure out the kinks, and they're going to have it. I think 26 was when they really get things figured out.
That'd be very interesting. All right. Look, we've already...
Hey, you want a bold. I brought you bold, baby.
That is bold. I don't hate the idea. Basically, we differ on which team is going to fight each other, more or less. Like, who's going to have a bad year? Like, you think McLaren's going to have a good year. I think McLaren is going to have a rough year. And quite opposite for Ferrari. Look, we've gone over time, and... we
don't get paid for overtime.
We don't get paid for overtime. We're not getting paid in general. But look, the reality is, it's because it's so much fun. And I think the reality is both of us sitting across the table here looking at each other is we don't want this thing to end.
No.
But
I'm excited. I want to farewell with this until we speak next time to the TLPs. One, we have a lot of things in store.
Yeah.
A lot of things in store. This thing's only going to get better.
Hopefully we can make a few things happen to really make this podcast,
possibly stay on the outs for a possible new social media account, something like that. We'll keep y'all posted, but one, this year's been a ton of fun. When me and Tristan talked about possibly doing this, I never knew, one, if it would come to fruition, and two, I didn't know how much I was going to care about it or how much consistency we were going to have with it. I just didn't want to get my hopes too high because, past experiences with podcasts and such, but man, this time has flown by.
Yeah.
I mean, this season's flown by. The podcasts have flown by. This is episode 16. It's insane. It's been so much fun, all the experiences that we have had, and I'm excited for next year. We're going to
hopefully we get some guests going as well.
We'll try to get some guests going, but we're going to be able to start this thing fresh. Mm-hmm. We're going to be able to we'll not have live coverage, but we'll be able to respond to the F175, and we'll get this thing going from race 1.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We won't have to worry. We won't have to start mid-season like we did this year. And I'm so excited for what is to come, and I'm excited for next season. I'm excited for Drive to Survive. I'm sure we'll have some reactions for that.
That'll come out before testing, and we'll be able to. I think
March,
if I'm not mistaken, that should come out before testing. So if that's true, we should be returning February 27th. We'll talk a little bit about the first day of testing, what we're seeing and what we think of Drive to Survive, and we'll have a nice little reaction, kind of like a little breathe-in to before we actually hit the season running on March 13th. So, look, we're not going to see you guys again. We're not going to hear from us at least until next year. But
might be seeing us.
Well, might be seeing us. Maybe. Tip the cap, right? So, look, let me wrap this thing up. With that, season 1 of the Lap Podcast is in the books. We will be back, hopefully with some noticeable improvements, as we've alluded to, heading into 2025. Barring some earth-shattering news, you will hear from us during testing week next year and around every single race weekend next season. So your favorite F1 podcast will be back February 27th, then our first pre-race weekend episode dropping March 13th. I know I'm going to miss this every week. We'll be missing you guys, the TLPs, our faithful listeners, but we will return. Until next time, be good, be healthy, happy holidays, a happy new year. That's Kevin Walker. I'm Tristan Rines. Adios.
Champions, baby. Let's go.